Remember, Bragg and Colangelo bootstrapped charges that are normally misdemeanors to some underlying crime to make the charges a felony. But what was the underlying crime? Prosecutors didn't reveal that until after the trial began. Mr. Colangelo, in his opening statement, accused President Trump of violating the Federal Elections Campaign Act. But the problem is, in the plain reading of that act doesn't support the indictment or the verdict. As Commissioner Smith stated, allowing this prosecution to go forward and the ultimate jury decision threaten the enforcement procedures established by Congress under the act and stretch the meaning of the statute in such a way as to threaten due process of law. It is clear Manhattan District Judge Juan Merchan's decisions, guided by political bias, unfairly prejudiced the outcome of the trial and violated President Trump's due process rights. Bragg's prosecution of President Trump, with the help of Judge Merchan, opened the door for politically motivated prosecutions, and it will not be easy to undo the damage that's already been done. As we have seen, other ambitious prosecutors have followed Bragg's lead and pursued politically motivated indictments against the former president. Rather than debate political opponents on substance, the Democrats' strategy to win the 2024 election is through the use of partisan, lawfare tactics. These politically motivated local prosecutions raise substantial federal interest and potential collusion between federal and state authorities. And that is precisely why we are here today. Alvin Bragg's prosecution of President Trump was personal, it was based on politics, and it was wrong.
I hear it.
If it was a contribution, it wouldn't have been reported until after the election, and no one suffered any losses, and yet they bring this charge against President Trump. I find that just amazing. If that's not political motivation, I don't.
Jim Jordan leaned forward, his voice rising above the room like a hammer. He waved his finger, pounded the table, and fired off question after question, convinced that sheer volume would make his point. But across from him sat Representative Jasmine Crockett, calm and unshaken, her eyes narrowing as if she'd been waiting for this exact moment. Jordan's questions grew faster, more chaotic. He smirked, sure that his performance would dominate the headlines. Yet his confidence was built on a shaky foundation, his lack of knowledge of the very laws he claimed to defend. And Crockett, a seasoned attorney, was ready to strike. She waited, letting him talk himself into a corner. Then, with razor-sharp precision, she cut through the noise. "Mr. Jordan, if you actually knew the law, you wouldn't even be asking that question." The words landed like a thunderclap. The room went silent. Jordan froze, his mouth still half open, as if the comeback had physically knocked the air from his lungs. Around them, muffled laughter and gasps rippled through the chamber. Crockett's delivery wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The weight of truth carried it further than Jordan's shouts ever could. For years, Jordan had thrived on grandstanding, mistaking bluster for brilliance. But in that moment, Crockett exposed what many had long suspected. His bark had no bite when faced with someone who actually understood the law. And that's where the story begins, not with another shouting match in Congress, but with a woman who stood firm against noise and showed the nation that knowledge, delivered with courage, will always silence arrogance. If you're tired of politicians who mistake volume for truth, and you believe in amplifying leaders who know the law and aren't afraid to use it, hit that subscribe button right now. Stay with us, because what happens next will leave you stunned. What made this exchange so explosive wasn't just the sting of Crockett's words. It was the stage on which it all unfolded. This wasn't a casual committee meeting. It was a nationally watched hearing, one meant to probe serious questions about justice, oversight, and the rule of law. Millions of Americans tuned in, already weary of endless shouting matches and partisan theatrics, hoping for a glimmer of accountability. Jim Jordan had entered that room ready to seize the spotlight. He thrives on theater, on creating moments that can go viral for his base. His tactic is always the same: overwhelm, interrupt, and dominate. But here's the catch. When the spectacle isn't backed by substance, it collapses under its own weight. That's exactly what Jasmine Crockett made clear. By calmly reminding him of his ignorance, Crockett shifted the energy of the entire hearing. Suddenly, it wasn't about his volume or his swagger. It was about the simple fact that Jordan didn't know what he was talking about. And in the world of law and legislation, that ignorance carries consequences for progressives and everyday Americans alike. The stakes of this clash were bigger than one soundbite. It wasn't just about Jordan embarrassing himself. It was about showing that arrogance cannot stand in place of truth. It was about proving that knowledge and preparation are more powerful than bluster and bullying. And just when viewers thought Crockett had delivered her knockout line, she wasn't finished. She leaned in, ready to peel back even more layers of Jordan's contradictions. Because what came next didn't just silence a congressman, it sent shockwaves through the entire political landscape. To understand why this moment struck such a chord, you have to look at Jim Jordan's playbook. For years, he's built a reputation not as a legislator who crafts solutions, but as a showman who thrives on confrontation. Cameras roll, tempers flare, and Jordan inserts himself front and center, armed with accusations but rarely with answers. His style is combative, his tone relentless. Supporters call it passion. Critics call it bullying. What's undeniable is that Jordan rarely concerns himself with the details of the law. He relies instead on spectacle, the loudest voice in the room, the sharpest jab, the performance that drowns out nuance. But this approach comes with cracks. Legal hearings are not campaign rallies. They demand precision, preparation, and the ability to back claims with evidence. And while Jordan has mastered the art of stirring chaos, he often falters when pressed for specifics. That vulnerability was about to be exposed in the most public way possible. By the time Crockett sat across from him, his reputation preceded him. She knew his tactics, she knew his weaknesses, and she knew the law inside and out. This wasn't just a battle of personalities. It was a collision between two worldviews, one that thrives on noise and another that values substance. And on this day, under the bright lights of Congress, Jordan's old tricks failed him. His reliance on bluster left him defenseless against someone who could dismantle his arguments with a single line. Still, Crockett wasn't just there to win a point. She was there to reveal the larger truth, that the people's business cannot be reduced to shouting matches. And what she delivered next would leave no doubt about it. To truly grasp why Crockett's words carried such power, you have to understand the woman behind the microphone. Crockett didn't stumble into politics by chance. Her path was carved through years of grit, discipline, and a fight for justice. Before she ever set foot in Congress, she built her reputation in the courtroom. As a defense attorney, she stood for those who often had no one else to stand with them. People overlooked, underestimated, and written off. In those trenches, she sharpened her skills, learning to navigate the complexities of the law and wield it as both shield and sword. She didn't just study statutes, applying them in high-stakes cases where every word mattered. By the time she entered Congress, Crockett carried with her not just a resume, but a mission. She wasn't there to grandstand or chase headlines. She was there to represent communities often ignored, to defend democratic norms, and to insist that truth, not noise, drive the debate. Her legal training gave her an edge that many of her colleagues lacked. Where others thrived on performance, she thrived on preparation. So when Jim Jordan tried to bulldoze his way through the hearing, Crockett was ready. She knew how to handle loud, aggressive opposition because she had faced far worse in the courtroom. She knew how to cut through distortion because she had spent years defending clients against it. And most of all, she knew how to let the law speak louder than ego. That's why her words carried such devastating weight. They weren't just a comeback in a committee room. They were the culmination of a career, defined by fighting ignorance with knowledge and arrogance with truth. And as the hearing unfolded, it became clear Jordan was no match for someone who had turned struggle into strength. and law into a weapon of accountability. The moment Jordan realized his opening volley hadn't landed, he doubled down. His voice grew louder, his words sharper, as he tried to regain control of the room. He peppered Crockett with rapid-fire questions, interrupting before she could answer, hoping to overwhelm her with sheer noise. It was the same tactic he had used countless times before. Talk fast, talk loud, and never let the other side breathe. But Crockett didn't flinch. Each time he tried to cut her off, she paused, letting his interruptions hang awkwardly in the air. She didn't need to match his volume. Silence became her weapon. And when she finally spoke, her tone was calm, deliberate, and surgical. She pointed out inconsistencies in his statements. She reminded him, and the nation watching, that the rule of law isn't a game of theatrics. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. Jordan, red-faced and agitated, versus Crockett, composed and precise. The more he shouted, the smaller he looked. The more she spoke, the larger her presence grew. At one point, Jordan stumbled over a legal term he clearly didn't understand. Crockett seized the opportunity. "That's not how the law works, Mr. Jordan, and if you don't know that, you shouldn't be sitting here pretending you do." The chamber gasped. It was the kind of line that cuts deeper than any insult, because it revealed the truth. The escalation reached a point where Jordan's fury became almost comical. His bluster was no longer intimidating. It was unraveling. And Crockett? She hadn't even broken a sweat. But what came next wasn't just about silencing Jordan. It was about delivering the blow that would echo far beyond the committee room. The breaking point came when Jordan, desperate to reassert himself, tried to twist a line of questioning into a pseudo-legal trap. She leaned in slightly, her tone steady, her gaze locked on him. "Mr. Jordan, you're confusing political theater with actual law. And let me be clear, in a courtroom, that wouldn't hold up for a single second." The room froze. It wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a verdict. Crockett wasn't playing defense anymore. She had flipped the script. As Jordan fumbled to recover, she continued, stacking fact upon fact. Each point she made wasn't just about winning the moment. It was about educating everyone watching. She cited precedents, clarified definitions, and dismantled his arguments with the elegance of a seasoned attorney. By the time she was done, there was nothing left for him to stand on. Then came the line that sealed the moment. "If you don't know the law, you don't get to lecture those of us who do." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Some members tried to suppress smiles. Even the cameras seemed to linger on Jordan's expression, a mix of disbelief and humiliation. His trademark aggression had evaporated, replaced by the stunned look of a man who had been cornered by his own ignorance. And Crockett? She didn't raise her voice, didn't gloat, didn't need to. The power of her words lay in their clarity and restraint. She delivered the knockout without theatrics, and that made it all the more crushing. By the time she leaned back in her chair, the hearing had shifted completely. What began as Jordan's attempt to dominate had ended with his authority in tatters. But Crockett's counterattack wasn't just about humbling one congressman. It was about setting a precedent that arrogance will always collapse when faced with truth. The exchange didn't end in that committee room. Within minutes, clips of Crockett's takedown began flooding social media. On Twitter, hashtags like #Crockett crushes Jordan and Know the Law started trending, shared by users who couldn't get enough of the mic drop moment. Memes popped up instantly, one showing Jordan buried under a stack of law books, another with Crockett wearing judge's robes, gavel in hand. But it wasn't only about ridicule. Crockett's response tapped into something deeper. For many viewers, especially women, minorities, and young progressives, her calm dismantling of arrogance felt like personal validation. It was proof that knowledge and preparation can cut through noise. Meanwhile, Jordan's camp scrambled to spin the moment. His defenders accused Crockett of disrespect and tried to shift the focus back to partisan talking points. But the damage was already done. The viral clip spoke louder than any excuse. By end of the day, Crockett's name was trending nationwide. She'd not only silenced Jordan in real time, she had elevated her profile, emerging as a new face of fearless, fact-driven leadership. And while the internet laughed and applauded, one question lingered in the air. If Jasmine Crockett could dismantle Jim Jordan so effortlessly, what might she do the next time another lawmaker tried the same stunt? When the noise finally settled, what remained wasn't just a viral clip or a moment of political theater, it was a lesson. Jasmine Crockett's exchange with Jim Jordan reminded the nation that leadership isn't about who can shout the loudest. It's about who can stand firm in truth. Her calm takedown underscored something. Americans desperately want to believe that knowledge and preparation still matter in public life. In a world where bluster often drowns out substance, Crockett showed that substance can reclaim the microphone. She didn't just silence Jordan. She reframed the debate itself, proving that dignity and clarity can overpower arrogance and noise. For viewers, especially those long disillusioned with politics, her words resonated on a deeper level. She embodied the idea that public servants are meant to know the law, to use it for justice, and to honor the people who put them there. Crockett wasn't defending herself. She was defending the principle that truth, backed by expertise, is the strongest weapon in any debate. And that's why her performance transcended partisanship. It wasn't just Democrats cheering. It was anyone who's ever felt dismissed by loud voices or silenced by arrogance. In the end, the moral was clear. Real strength lies not in theatrics, but in mastery. Crockett didn't need to raise her voice, because the law itself was her amplifier. And as she left that hearing room, one thing was undeniable. America had just witnessed what it looks like when preparation meets courage. As the gavel finally came down, the echoes of Crockett's words still hung in the air. What began as another predictable hearing had transformed into a defining moment. Au Parzi's clear reminder that truth, when spoken with courage, can cut through even the loudest noise. Jim Jordan came in expecting to dominate, but he left exposed. Crockett came in prepared, and she left elevated. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. Arrogance defeated by knowledge. Performance overshadowed by substance. For those watching at home, this wasn't just politics. It was a revelation. It showed that leaders who understand the law, who respect the process, and who stand firm in their convictions can still prevail in an era where shouting often passes for strength. Crockett's calm but devastating takedown was more than a moment. It was a promise that dignity still has a place in American democracy. And now the question shifts to us, the audience, the citizens, the ones who carry this story forward. Do we settle for noise, or do we demand substance? Do we reward arrogance, or do we uplift those who bring knowledge and courage to the fight? If you believe in amplifying voices like Jasmine Crockett's, voices that speak with clarity and conviction, then don't let this moment fade. Subscribe to this channel, share this story, and be part of a movement that insists on truth over theatrics. Because if this hearing taught us anything, it's that arrogance may roar, but knowledge always wins.